Hello, everyone. Welcome to this joint Astrophysics and Global Systems Institute seminar. For those of you in Astro who don't know, I'm one of the assistant directors of the GSI. And this is a seminar that I try and organize every term so that we have an opportunity as astronomers to meet people from other disciplines, including earth sciences, creative writing, and many more. And so I really encourage you to stick around after Christine's talk and ask questions to Christine, meet Christine, and meet each other and meet everybody that you don't know, and vice versa for the non-astronomers in the room as well. So please mingle and meet each other. And that's actually how Christine and I met, over coffee. So you know, well, we met because you asked me to give a lecture in your course. But then after that, we had coffee. And that's where the ideas started coming out. And so I'm really excited to introduce Dr. Christine Lehnen, who is a researcher, lecturer in creative writing. She has published 10 books. She's got an 11th book that's on the way that you just wrote in like 2 months, a month, 2 weeks.
It was a dark time.
Coming out in the summer. And also Christine has worked in international broadcasting, so she's a journalist as well. And she's super passionate about astrophysics and about space exploration, the fate of the world, what's going on today, and how we can tackle it. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming Christine.
Much, Rafi. I hope everyone can hear me okay. I hope people online can hear us okay. If not, give a shout, and I assume someone else is going to fix that problem. So thank you very, very much to Rafi and to the GSI for inviting me to deliver this research seminar for the Global Systems Institute. Rafi is right. I am oddly passionate about space, considering I did not decide to do astrophysics. But I hope I can put that passion to some good use. So today I'm going to talk to you for about 30, maybe 40 minutes about a sustainable space race. And what do I mean by sustainable? I do not mean that rockets won't need fuel. Rockets will need fuel. This is a fact of life. What I'm talking about is a sustainable narrative of space exploration. So how do we tell the story of space exploration? What are we doing it for? Why are we funding it or not funding it? And how can we do the best possible thing for ourselves and for the planet and for humans? During the course of my talk, I am going to talk a little bit about Halley's Comet. I'm going to talk about the climate crisis. I'm also going to talk about something that is called object fabulation, which is a fun and interesting thing, but we'll get there. No rush. Anyway, so I think why is this important now? Right, I mean, sustainability has been a buzzword for at least, 30 years. Why does this matter now, and why does it matter to astronomy and astrophysics? I think the reason why this matters now and what's special about this moment that we're in is that we have now developed the ability to detect other Earths outside the solar system. So exoplanets, we couldn't always do that. I think it was first happened in the 90s, early 2000s. It's nodding, that's good. So it's quite a recent, really, thing. We haven't always been able to do that. So that's quite exciting, obviously, and very fun. At the same time, this happens at the same time as the worsening of the climate crisis. So we do now have, in all parts of the world, we can now actually notice the impact of the climate crisis. There's more and more extreme weather events. The wildfires in California recently are just one example among many. So in brief, the states have now also noticed that the climate crisis is real. And that is an interesting mix because it's brought up a question in the public debate, which is in the heading of this Guardian article, should we colonize other planets? So this is from 2023, and the debate has developed since then. But let's talk about this article. The big idea, should we colonize other planets? I mean, you can guess what the Guardian thinks about this. my newspaper of choice. But in this article, the reporter says that the question of human settlement on Mars is for many people not if but when. Obviously, Elon Musk is at the forefront of that endeavor. But even NASA has now said, once the exclusive province of science fiction stories and films, the subject of space colonization has rapidly moved several steps closer to becoming a reality. So, you know, Elon Musk and NASA do agree on this. This Guardian reporter asks, I think, a fair question, namely, why, though, should we wish to dwell on a world that lacks what we need to survive? This is a fair question. There's a few answers. I've cited this before, and I'm still not quite sure whether it's actually true, but Stephen Hawking apparently said that spreading out into space may be the only thing that saves us from ourselves, so from the threat of a human-made catastrophe such as the climate crisis. Obviously, that isn't true. So obviously, we can't all go to Mars and just live on Mars. We also can't travel to exoplanets outside the solar system and live there. This just ain't going to happen. The point isn't whether it's true or not, sadly. The point is whether it's in the debate or not. And it is in the debate. And this is a much more recent article from this year. I think it would be naive not to assume that with a second Trump administration, this isn't going to be pushed forward even more and more strongly. So we are going to see from the US a push, sort of ignoring the climate crisis, but a push towards resource extraction on the moon and space colonization of Mars. This is, I'm afraid, coming because Mars has to make America great again. Poor Mars. I pity the planet. So what's really interesting to me is that we have these debates about, at the heart of these debates is the question, what is space exploration for, right? Why do we look at the stars? And what we don't hear in those debates is, we don't hear from actual astronomers and astrophysicists, is my impression. So I've had the opportunity to talk to a few astrophysicists. This is from a research seminar I did a bit in Cambridge as part of the terror hunting experiment science team meeting this last October, I think. Time has no more meaning. And this I just asked, so why did you become an astronomer? What was your reason? Why do you think it's interesting and fun to look at the stars? And you can see in this wonderful little mind map that the biggest word, so the one that was chosen the most frequently, is wonder. It's wonder. It's philosophically appealing, curiosity, interesting, beautiful. Space is big. My favorite answer, space is very, very big. There's much to discover. It's fascinating, exciting mysteries, mystery of the cosmos, and so on. Some of my other favorites are actually eclipse prediction. I think that it's lovely that someone is so specific about what draws them into that field. Also by accident, and I still think there's money up there somewhere, which just makes me laugh every single time. But there are obviously some prosaic reasons to go into the field, but there is certainly an emphasis on wonder, right, and curiosity and wanting to find out stuff, which isn't surprising because astrophysicists are scientists. But this isn't something that is coming up a lot in the public debate. And I talked to an astrophysicist last week at Manchester who said that, so why is this a problem, right? I mean, that's fine, whatever. The public doesn't need to share in the motivations for looking at the stars, like they don't need to share in the wonder. Only they do, because the problem is that the narrative about why we look at the stars determines what we think is worthy of funding and of being pursued, and what our goals should be in relation to astrophysics and astronomy. So that's why this is actually important, right? So what can we do? Basically, I have developed a research project with Rafi, and this research project is all about what we need. What we need is a new sustainable narrative for space exploration. What does that mean? That narrative needs to be, it needs to enable us to get excited about something that isn't terraforming Mars. We can also be allowed to be excited about terraforming Mars. That's, you know, if that's your jam, that's your jam. But people are already, Elon Musk is already very excited about this. So someone else needs to get excited about something else. And that thing is going to have to be a sustainable thing. So it can't be, again, about resource extraction or space colonization. Why? Because we really don't have a planet B. So we really don't want to give the impression that we can at some point live on Mars, all of us, or live even more ludicrous on an exoplanet outside the solar system. So that is something that we'd want to combat. There's the narrative around mining the moon. And this is going to happen, like in the next 10 to 20 years, this is going to happen. There's going to be certainly efforts to be made. There's going to be efforts made to extract resources from the moon. So it is time to talk about this now. Like, let's not leave it until the first spaceship goes up with mining equipment. And of course, the sort of the Occupy Mars idea. So what does Mars have to offer that isn't Matt Damon planting potatoes? Which, you know, nothing against Matt Damon planting potatoes, nice to look at, but maybe there's something more exciting out there on Mars. So, in other words, what this narrative needs to do is it needs to be different from what's out there right now in these three respects. And I think the key question to this is why do we look at the stars? So what can we get excited about in astronomy that isn't space colonization? And the way to answer this question is to think about why we have looked at the stars in the past. Because humanity, usefully, has always looked at the stars. We've always done astronomy. Like from the earliest civilizations that we know, there's a record of writing and of star observations. So clearly, we want to do this. And the ancient Babylonians looked at the sky a lot, even though they clearly couldn't go to the moon or Mars. They really didn't think about space colonization at all. So what were they thinking about? What was cool about the stars in 2300 BCE? Because probably that's still cool. I mean, yeah, it's probably part of being human, looking at the stars. So what I want to do with this research project, which is aptly called Looking at the Stars, little nod to Oscar Wilde, in case anyone's familiar with the quote. Anyway, what this research project wants to do, it wants to find a time-transcending narrative of space exploration, right? So why have we looked at the stars in the past? Because that narrative is by necessity not going to be about resource extraction and space colonization, because there was no way ancient Babylonians could go to Mars or mine the moon. Why is it interesting to look at the past? So how do we get to this narrative? So what I do is I'm a lecturer and researcher in creative writing. I specialize in contemporary literature, particularly the historical novel, and in memory studies and in what is called practice-based research, which just means doing something useful, I guess, with your practice, your creative practice. And I have developed in my PhD at Manchester a method called object fabulation, which uses objects held in museum collections to generate hypotheses about what individuals in the past got up to and why. Obviously, these are only hypotheses, but I'm going to talk about the method in a bit more detail later. I've used that method to write my next book, which is called Remembering Women, Lessons from the Ancient World. And that book looks at objects held in Bronze Age graves and makes suggestions about how we can learn from the past to have a more gender equal society today. So that's what I do. And all of this is based in memory studies. So memory studies is a cool field, cool interdisciplinary field that obviously has a long tradition, et cetera, but in its modern form came about after, in the 1950s, so after the Holocaust, to look at how we look at the past and how we remember the past and what it makes us do in the present. And the basic, I mean, I can talk about memory studies for hours, but I won't. But if you have any questions, let me know. The basic tenet of memory studies is what we believe to have been normal in the past appears to us as normal today and as desirable for the future. That's sort of the baseline of memory studies. And there's some good evidence for this, that this is actually true. So if we believe that something was done like this in the Stone Age, we're more likely to say, oh yeah, that's a natural and cool thing for us to do, which gets us into all sorts of trouble, obviously. But it is that basic assumption that we have this idea of a primordial past. So the primordial past is always sort of 2,000 to 4,000 years in the past. It obviously isn't real. Like, it's not the real past. We don't actually think about what happened 4,000 years ago. We just have this idea, this cultural memory of sort of the distant past and what was normal then, and what that sort of determines what we think of as makes us human and is normal in the present. And for the UK, that's so an example of a text that is, so for in the UK, a text that's really important for our primordial past is the Iliad by Homer and the Trojan War, which obviously didn't happen. The Trojan War did not happen. I cannot stress this enough. But yeah, we don't care. It's part of our cultural memory. So some of the assumptions in that text have come to shape our present and our norms and values in the present. Cool, memory studies. Again, if there's any questions, let me know. I'm happy to talk about this until I'm blue in the face. Right, why is all of this useful? So the reason why all of this is useful is that I believe that the current narrative that we have for space exploration, which is based in space colonization and resource extraction, is emerged in the Victorian era. So with industrialization and the emergence of science fiction, we got this idea that progress is traveling to other places, colonizing other places, using the resources of other places. This again, it goes hand in hand with the emergence of modern science fiction. So Jules Verne, H.G. Wells, and Mary Shelley all founded modern science fiction. So in other words, what's really cool about that? It's really cool that this is not a very old narrative. This is quite young, right? Like 150 years maybe. So that's good, because we are looking for something that is a bit older than that. Anyway, so this Victorian narrative still continues to really shape our space imaginary. I've just put 3 shows and films up there. All of Mankind, The Martian, and The Expanse are all about traveling to other planets, potatoes, Mars, colonies, war, whatever. However, there is also, which is probably important to note, there's also alternative narratives already out there. Star Trek is a good example. Again, something we can talk about more. But fascinating as all of these narratives are, what I'm really interested in is what happened in the distant past. So where was astronomy invented as a discipline? Does anyone know? Where do we have this first record? This isn't a quiz, I won't make you guess. So the first record of an observation of the stars is from ancient Babylonia. I've put up the picture of the sky disk of Nebra just to confuse everyone. No, I haven't. That's even older, but I don't think it quite, well, it's not quite writing, is it? So the first official record of observing the skies is from ancient Babylonia. They were the first civilization to put stellar observations into writing, or writing that we have deciphered. And what is really cool about the ancient Babylonians is that they were really good at astronomy, which, you know, is surprising considering was 3,000 years ago. So they produced the first observation of Halley's Comet. The tablet is in the British Museum. It is tiny. It's tiny. It's the tiniest thing. I just can't. I mean, just to think about how someone wrote that thing. There was no artificial light. You'd have anyway. Okay. So tiny tablet, but important information. Halley's Comet was recorded in the Neo-Babylonian Empire. And what's also really interesting is that they already proposed a heliocentric worldview. So there was a Babylonian astronomer who said, yeah, we're probably all going around the sun. Like, oh, well, that's quite good, isn't it? Yeah, it took us a long time to catch up with that. But they were quite good at it. And that's nice for us, because I would suggest, this is my third hypothesis, is that we can use object fabulation to generate hypotheses about why Babylonian astronomers looked at the stars. There's enough objects, they were good enough at it. It was similar enough to what we are doing now as a science. It wasn't just looking at the skies and thinking basically astrology. They were actually doing science. So that's quite nice, because I can use my creative research method. I can generate hypotheses. And then I can appeal to contemporary astronomers to become my control group. Sorry. Because the whole idea with object fabulation is that you generate hypotheses from objects or archaeological landscapes, but then you run those hypotheses by people in the present who are doing the thing that you are hypothesizing about, and help you talk about whether the things you've come up with are plausible or not. Yes, and the hope is that that would help us discover a, perhaps not timeless, that's a bit too much to ask, but a time transcending narrative of why we look at the stars and what is at the heart of that wonder and curiosity. So, this is my third point already. Good. My third point is why it will be fun. Why is this fun? Why is this worth doing? So I think we have some extremely cool candidates for thinking about why space exploration is fun in a sustainable way and not in a space colonization, resource extraction way. One of them is alien life. I mean, it's an obvious thing almost, but wasn't as obvious to me, incidentally, until I got talking to astrophysicists about this. We are going to find out, right, in the next, hopefully, in the next 10 to 20 years, whether alien life is common or rare. Are we alone in the universe? That is, I think, obviously fascinating. It's going to be fascinating. Are we not? Sorry, what? Are we? No? Oh, shit. Sorry. Oh, how much longer? 30? 25? Can I get it in 20? Okay, I'm an optimist. It works. I'll go with 10. 9. Anyway, whether we find out or not, I think the important thing is that this is something we could talk about, right? When we talk about, for example, discovering exoplanets, and you are being interviewed about how that's important, you could say, yeah, we can never travel there. But what's really cool is that this will help us discover more about whether there's life out there, right? You can shift the conversation, even if we don't know in 20 years. Another candidate is, and this is really interesting and something that needs more thinking about, is how we could use data from other Earths to better understand and protect planet Earth. So how do you understand more about planet Earth? Yeah, I just need something. I just need to make that sexy. So you need, a metaphor or a figure or something. It's the interesting thing to think about is always how does this relate to the past? So with alien life, I think this is obvious in the sense that obviously Babylonian astronomers looked at the skies and thought the gods were not necessarily up there, but were talking to them through the stars, so that there were omens and we could tell stuff about the future from the skies, which obviously wasn't correct. But there is a desire there to not be alone in the universe, even if the other people that are up there are gods, and there are quite a few gods. With this idea of better understanding planet Earth, I think that is also interesting because this is also what the Babylonians did it for. So they had a very good understanding of tides, and they knew that the moon was involved in the movement of tides. And why was this important? Why did they do that? I mean, A, they were really curious, but also B, they lived in the delta of the Tigris River. And it was incredibly important to understand stuff about what the river does, because it has to nourish all of their crops. So there is that instinct, even, or that desire, even back then, to look at the stars to understand more about how we can protect people in the present and how we can make this planet livable for people. Mars and Moon, that's fun, but also needs more thinking. What can we do about Mars and Moon? How can we reframe that debate? Don't know, but if you have ideas, let me know. I'll think more about this. This is very much a work in progress. Shall we have? We have more time. This is great. So that is basic idea, right? We need to get, just to recap, currently the narrative around space exploration is focused on space colonization and resource extraction. That doesn't need to be the case. And it would probably be better if it wasn't the case, because then we could make a better case for getting funding for stuff that isn't research that isn't about either of these things. So that would be very good. We have precedent in human history for astronomy and astronomers looking at the not to go to other planets. So we can use that to think about what makes it really cool to look at the skies and how we can enthuse people in a different way. And the thing that we could get excited about, I mean, there's different things. One of them is protecting planet Earth. The other is there, are we alone? Is there life out there? The third thing is something about the moon and Mars that I haven't figured out yet. So there's things we can think about and do. And now I'm going to tell you about my research design, which may be slightly unusual, but I'd actually be quite grateful for any thoughts on this. Because this is probably a 3-year project. This is just the first 18 months. I would hope that I will have the opportunity in Cambridge in April to have a workshop with some astrophysicists on where I can collect some data. We're doing it great. It's official. I love it. We're doing it. So what we're going to do is really focus on those questions. Why did you decide to go into astronomy? Why do you think we do it? And why is it fun, fascinating, and exciting? And what do we want everyone to get excited about? And those are, in some ways, basic questions, but they're obviously really important in shaping a narrative that is going to be appealing and interesting and also truthful. I would then take all of that information and I will go to the British Museum and the Ashmolean Museum in Oxford and the Manchester Museum. And I've worked at all of these museums before, and I will go into the collections and look at astronomical objects from the Babylonian period and generate some hypotheses about why people looked at the stars. As a side note, I will obviously use that to then start working on my next book. I mean, it's going to be a 12th book. Like, you can't stop at 11, that's silly. Then we would hopefully have a second workshop with the science team, hopefully in October, where we could verify or not these hypotheses. And that would then be used by me to develop proposals on how we could turn those hypotheses into a new narrative about space exploration. And I think the key thing, okay, we're going to obviously test and modify and evaluate. So one of the outputs of this project is supposed to be a communications toolkit for astrophysicists, where which can really be applied to any interaction with the public or interaction in the public debate. So let's say someone's being interviewed, they've discovered an exoplanet, everything's very exciting. They're being interviewed and someone asks about, can we now go and live on that planet? Then it might be useful to have something to say other than, oh, we can't, it's too far away. So to reshape that debate and think about, what do we want people to be talking about? So in that interview, do I mention that? But the reason why this is really exciting is X, Y, Z. So that, and that would also be, I think, a very useful thing to have for press releases. Because I don't know how many people have worked as journalists, but the reality of working as a journalist is that you get a press release and then you have 0.5 minutes to write an article from that press release. So frankly, most of the time, there's been occasions where press releases have been just posted as they are from the institution that has given them to us. I never said that, obviously never did that. But that this does happen. And so in many ways, the press release is incredibly important, and that it really primes people, particularly journalists, on what the story is. Right? You look at what is the anchor and what is the story. And this is something that cannot be overestimated how important that is. So this new narrative could already make up part of the press release, which would be quite useful. And there would also be some policy proposals about communication and how to communicate a sustainable space race. I mean, NASA's going to be so thrilled, but right, and then some publications on the subject. We also have a global exhibition impact project, but I just don't have, it's a cool project. Do I have time to talk? Yes, I do have 3 minutes to talk to you about that. So there's also the idea for a global exhibition project. So 12 members of the science team of Parenting have been kind enough to volunteer to participate in this exhibition project, in which we would create 360-degree videos of individual astrophysicists, ideally standing next to the telescope on La Palma, but we'll see what happens. Talking about, in their native language, talking about why they become astronomers and why space exploration is cool and not all about mining the moon. And then we would make these videos accessible on posters, so you could scan a poster with your smartphone and then watch that 360-degree video as if you were there. And we would place those posters in the hometowns of those astrophysicists. So if there's an observatory on a planetarium, it can be in there, or if there's a local museum, it can be in there, or if there's a shopping mall, there's a shopping mall for an exhibition space, we'll take the shopping mall. And it would also be good to have a few lighthouse exhibition locations where we have all the posters. So the Greenwich Observatory is an obvious choice. Manchester has an important observatory, so have some of those lighthouse sort of exhibition spaces. That's cool. That's just pending funding. But I mean, isn't everything pending funding? Yes, so that is the research design. These are the outputs that we've been talking about. Quite a few, but then it's also important. Funding. And I could talk to you a bit more about object fabulation, but actually, I might not. I mean, if you're interested in object fabulation, talk to me. It's a fun thing. This is the questionnaire that I use. Yeah, it produces cool results. And to conclude, so I do think we need a sustainable narrative for space exploration, and we need it now. Now's the time to do it. Let's not wait. I do think, hopefully not at the risk of offending anyone, but it will probably have to come out of Europe, or at least I'm not sure that the US are going to be at the forefront of sustainable space exploration for the next 4 years. It should be focused on what is exciting about sustainable space exploration, and we do have a few cool candidates already. And now what this needs is to actually be researched and done. I do have a few questions for you, because we have plenty of time to talk. Isn't that great? What gets you excited about space? If anyone has any thoughts to offer on the research design, I'd be extremely grateful. Thoughts on sustainability and space exploration, and also thoughts on the contemporary space exploration narrative. What is annoying about it and harmful, but also what maybe is quite cool, and what, because you don't want to throw out the baby with bathwater. Just before I close, there's a SpaceX conference happening this weekend. Is it this weekend? Yes, Francis. Thank you, Francis. It has a lot of very cool speakers. And Ari Rice-Tisi is talking about making the case.
It's the commercialization of space, so that should be really interesting. He's a lawyer, and this is his specialism, so unique and different.
And that is really cool. Thank you very much. This is Francis, a student. He's amazing. And he's been putting this together. So, and Gabby is also on this. Gabby, you're on this. Great, Gabby will also be speaking. Amazing. So this is an excellent SpaceX conference taking place on Saturday. And I'll leave up the QR code for you to maybe scan and get interested in. And that is pretty much it from me. And yeah, thank you very much for your time and your attention. And I would love to discuss some of these questions. So any and all comments, I'm very grateful for any and all comments. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Christine. Any questions? Nathan?
So sounds like you can do loads of cool stuff. I guess my first question is, I'm surprised that the exploration, colonization narrative is actually even the dominant one. Mm-hmm. If I think about all the engagement and outreach I do, that question does come up, but it's actually very rare. And your own work has also showed that astronomers, and I think if you look at kind of the top stories that get clicked on in BBC, it's not about mining. It's actually just about pure exploration and curiosity driven. So I guess my big question is, number one, I'm not even sure this is a dominant narrative. And I sort of think we already have the alternative narrative, and you've kind of showed it, that we have it already. So I guess I'm asking, what's your target audience? Astronomers are, as your data has showed, have already on board. And I think there's quite a few talks, not least my own, that talk about alien life and talk about supporting the planet that we live on and all this kind of stuff. So I guess who is the narrative for? Because if I look at funding in the UK as well, I don't think that mining and colonization gets a whole load of funding and curiosity-driven astrophysics research doesn't. I mean, we have plenty of funding to detect planets. Does that make sense?
That makes sense. This is the most disappointing question ever when someone says, this is a cool idea, but we don't need it.
Well, no, I think the stuff you're doing could be great for other reasons, but I'm just, yeah.
I was joking. No, it's a good point, and I think I agree in that it is so interesting that it really isn't when you talk to astronomers on the one hand, but also just people who are interested in astronomy. They don't say, "Oh, I'm extremely excited about mining the moon." Like, no.
People work at NASA.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, I know.
Spent to go to Mars is to look for evidence of life before.
Absolutely.
Not to set out for colonization. They just have to say stuff that means they get money.
They get money, exactly. And I think that's exactly what I'm about. That thing, right, where you have to say stuff to get money, and matters. The stuff that we have to say to get money. I mean, obviously we can't just say, oh, whatever. It's just what we say to get money. But the more often we say it, the more it obviously becomes a reality and a real thing.
In the US, but it doesn't get said in Europe.
No, I agree, which is why I probably think this is the right place to be doing this sort of research. But I am looking at the global debate in the media, and by that I mean Anglophone, US, UK media, and policymakers. So I do think it would be quite important to have some of that language. But Rainer Forst is a philosopher, and he talks about orders of justification, and that's what my research into the past is about. So the past can be an order of justification. It can allow us to justify certain things and not justify others. And I think there is a real danger that we are seeing a shift in the order of justification, and that justification is now really focused, certainly in the States, who are an incredibly important actor in space exploration, right? On that sort of narrative, so on resource extraction and space colonization. And I mean, it'd be great if that doesn't matter or isn't going to have an effect, but I think it is. It's going to shape the debate in a certain way, and those justifications are going to become more prominent and important. I mean, I hope not, obviously. I hope it's all fine and we don't need to worry about it.
I don't know enough about it, to be honest. I don't know the funding there, but I mean, it sounds like you want to take on Trump and Musk, which, good luck.
So, but someone's got to. But thank you so much for the question.
Yeah, I mean, in the States, there's a whole postmodernist current, right? And that is very much about, going to colonize other planets, and also in response to the climate crisis, right? This isn't just about astronomers' motivations. It's also as climate change is going to get worse, this kind of narrative could become more prominent because it's an escape, right?
Yeah, it's an escape fantasy, obviously. It's not going to happen. But yeah, I agree. I think this could come back to bite us in ways we don't want it to.
I'm closer. I won. Yeah, I was thinking, why choosing to move away from the dominant narrative, whatever that is, which could be easily sort of like evidenced by doing a little bit of natural language processing throughout the news, getting some of the AI people here that do that and show where those news are appearing. So that would be a method for you to actually say, well, this is a dominant narrative in these places, in this other side of things. And of course, there are a couple of assumptions that I think are a little bit problematic. One is that this is an expert-centric approach, right? You're assuming that these bunch of astronomers, they are the people you should be speaking with. And they're the sort of the beacon of science. Right? Secondly, you have this cultural idea of Babylon as the kind of like ancestor, right? And that means that I'm thinking about, the Mayans. They did a lot of these things that we could call modern science, right? And in a way, what you're doing by this sort of going back in time and reproducing the idea of science is making it narrow. And I guess, when you were talking in your presentation, you were talking like this was science, right? They were not thinking about gods. And if you ask a lot of people today, I have a couple of friends that are cosmologists. They are debating about the constant that makes the cosmos possible for life. And some people say, I mean, these theological debates are not something that just happened in the past. They're still present with us. Some Christians, astronomers, are actually really engaged in seeing this as the proof, the mathematical proof that there's some sort of God. Some of the other more modern scientists would say, no, that's not the right thing. So anyway, I think there's a couple of assumptions there that bring us back to some of the old-fashioned debates. And if I understand object fabulation, this is Haraway, STS sort of stuff, then I think maybe you need to push away from those things. Maybe open it up for different cultures. That is not just your center point, Babylon, right? If it's happening in the global south, expand the global south ideas of cosmology and science.
Yeah.
Then maybe break with this expertocratic idea of, well, let's act, astronomers are the ones that are going to tell us the cool thing about why we look at the stars. That might not be the case. They might be so disciplined that the way they look at the stars is about measuring them. So there are a couple of assumptions there. We can talk about research methodology, but the AI one, I thought that could be a cool one to.
Absolutely.
And the questions are not challenging at all.
Mhm.
Right? So this is the sort of thing in which I'm deferent. Already in your research design, you're being deferent to these guys. Tell me why you're exciting and why you're so cool. And there's no challenge here. So that brings me to my last comment, which is why leave that very problematic narrative of Elon Musk and the right-wing libertarians, right? It's clear this is right-wing libertarianism because it's an escape from Earth. There are so many, and not establish a confrontational method here with that narrative and then think about the alternatives.
Sorry, so not to
No,
confrontational.
no, confront that narrative. Instead of like finding the alternatives, use it as an anchor point to think about the politics of the whole issue.
Right.
Right? Like,
Okay. Very interesting. Yes, thank you. So first of all, thank you. Very interesting. AI, definitely that needs to happen. Also, good point. I should have said that in the exhibition project, there is a mechanism in there to actually collect the people who engage with the exhibition, to collect their opinions on why space is cool and why it matters. But it's a good point. It should be earlier on in the research design. But the thing about sort of not presenting an alternative to a narrative, the problem is that if you don't present an alternative, this is more broadly true, sadly, is that the right-wing political narratives, they're very good at having a clear narrative. And for a long, long time, what we did sort of, if I may speak for all of us, maybe not, but what we did on the left was sort of say, no, it's more complicated than that. It's more nuanced, like we need to engage with, we need to criticize this, we need to open it up. And that is obviously true, but it is also true that you need a narrative and another narrative, an alternative for people. And unfortunately, I'm afraid it's not enough to just say, no, that isn't true and that isn't correct. And if you look at this in great detail, then you'll find out that this actually isn't correct. Actually, you do need a different vision. And that is the goal of that research.
As well, I mean, does that mean that we're pushing for anyone that doesn't go onto that narrative not to get funded?
I mean, I wish I had that much influence. Yeah.
Saying this narrative is wrong and it shouldn't get funding, so we need to make this narrative and that should be the one. I mean, I'm not entirely sure there should be any small group of people that get to decide that. Not a big fan of that.
Okay, yeah, thank you. I'll take that on board.
Aren't we just at a transition from space exploration being funded by governments to space exploration being funded by business? Isn't that all we're seeing? And that happened in the 1600s, right? I mean, Columbus's mission to America was funded by the Spanish government. And these days, anyone can fly to America, or right? So we had transatlantic travel was funded by governments 400 years ago. Now it's funded by you and me. We can fly to America anytime we want to. So I'm not sure. You only need a narrative that appeals to lots of people if the backing of lots of people is required in order to do the exploration. And if the government isn't the major player anymore, you don't really need most of the people to back anything. Individuals can do it, or companies, or so I'm not quite sure why you want a different narrative, because probably within a few years government funding is going to be almost irrelevant. The same as EasyJet today is not funded by the government. It's funded by people wanting to go on holiday. So if you have enough people wanting to go to the moon for a holiday, it will happen.
Yes, that is definitely true. I don't. So I agree with your statement that what we are seeing is a shift from government funding to private funding. However, I do not think it's a foregone conclusion. Government funding is still significant enough, and we are not at the stage where travel to the moon is being funded by EasyJet. So actually, again, now is exactly the right time. But we don't need to think about a new narrative if we're all flying with EasyJet to the moon. That then has become a foregone conclusion. Whereas now is a time to think about what we want space exploration to look like in an environment where government actors maybe aren't as important as they used to be. So we don't. If we're going to do it at all, we need to do it now. But we don't need to do it once there's an EasyJet that flies us to the moon. We'll have other problems by then.
I'm just going to sort of point out that we've got a similar situation with Antarctica here, where we're not in there mining. We've sort of come to an agreement through all the countries in the world not to, or try not to wreck Antarctica. There's a certain bigger issue, and we've sort of kept away from it. There's a few research stations. There's a little bit of, scuffing of one group of nations against another. But essentially, nobody's claimed ownership of the whole of Antarctica. What worries me is that we haven't got really a similar extent of mechanism when thinking about first start the moon, which is the next obvious place that we're going to want to exploit. We've got Chinese, we've got the Indians, we've got Russia, we've got the US, we've got maybe the European Space Agency at some stage might be involved in this. And they're all looking to the moon to provide a lot of these critical minerals and things. And I think I'd go along with the point that Matthew was making, that it's going to be commercially driven. It's not, the moon is somehow considered to be out there for our taking, whereas for some reason we've fairly well left Antarctica alone. So maybe we can use that as a model.
Yeah, I agree entirely, and I think what you were saying is actually it just demonstrates how important it is to do this now, because it's not a foregone conclusion that we're not going to come to the same sort of agreement about the moon as we did about Antarctica. But humans can actually agree not to do something. We haven't nuked each other yet, so it's.
Oh.
But so we can actually do that, and again, which is why I think it's so important to do this now that we are in this tradition, and not when everything's already been decided and the moon has been sort of divided up. Yes, obviously that this project is just a small part of that, but I do think it's important to do it and to do it now. Yeah, I agree, basically. We have another question.
Naomi, okay. Yeah, and then we'll ask.
Thank you very much for all of those comments. I'm still formulating this thought as I speak, but your comment about the fact that we may not be going to rely on government funding in the future, and that it may all be individuals, is probably true. But surely the point is whether or not we allow any individual who has enough money to do what they like, or whether we as people, as citizens of this earth, are allowed to have a say in what does or doesn't happen, given that, I don't know, the possibility that we go to the moon, we start mining the moon, we do something to it that somehow affects its, I don't know, density, whatever. I'm an artist, I'm not a scientist. So you guys are going to say what might happen if we start mining it and it goes off balance and it affects our tides or whatever. I mean, I'm really hypothesizing. I don't know, but Surely we have to think about that before just saying, oh, we're not going to be able to stop it. There are going to be people who want to go there. We can all just fly there. I mean, look at the fact that we do have EasyJet and we fly to all of these places and people are going on cruises to Antarctica and we're slowly ruining it. And I think we do actually have an obligation to think about these things as opposed to just saying, oh, it's going to happen. And we shouldn't make rules about that. Just my opinion. Sure. Yeah, but I mean, they're all important, aren't they? It's not, I don't think there's a priority. I think it's where you put resource and therefore it's why we're doing it. And do we all get a chance to ask those questions?
Yeah, I agree.
I mean, it's a way to think about geoengineering, right? It's we can look at the moon and look at these other planets and think about space exploration in order to think about geoengineering on Earth in a sort of neutral territory. I mean, people like is it Lucian Wolkowitz has done this, looking at colonizing Mars, like narratives of colonizing Mars and how those narratives, how we tell those stories of going to Mars and putting people there and living on it and eradicating whatever was on there before and appropriating it for ourselves. Like, though, how we tell those stories, it says a lot about what's going on here with colonization on this planet in our societies, right? And she was saying that it's basically a way to talk about these things, but maybe in a somewhat detached way, because we're thinking about Mars, we're not thinking about.
Yeah.
Mostly Western literature. In science fiction wise, there's quite a big divide between Western and Eastern literature and approaches to that.
Yeah.
There's actually an English professor Western studies now. I'm trying to remember her name.
Oh yeah. That'd be good to know, yeah.
Yeah, it was years ago when Tim quite a lot of leaking himself. That was quite near inside. Cool.
Absolutely, but yeah, thanks, love. But just to emphasize that, it's true that we can understand the principles, right, of the story and how they affect what we do on Earth if we use space as almost as an experiment, a ground for experiment.
Yeah. Online, there's a question. So what about including non-expert, non-academic authors of science fiction? Because creative speculation extends the space and crosses cultures. So thinking of Le Guin and how she extends the scope of futures imagining. A possible question is like, what sci-fi or a film has inspired you?
Oh, cool. 2 questions. Okay, so yes, so Le Guin, I didn't talk about Le Guin because she's so good. This is true, and it would be good to have input, non-expert input. So this is a really good point, and this needs to just come in much earlier. But also have input from creatives on the subject. And there's been very recently a project on where the UK government got together science fiction writers and asked them, oh, can you imagine the future for us, please? And we'll do something with that policy-wise. And so I think it would be good to get in touch with them and find out how to do that. This is mostly a logistical question, just who can you get together? And yeah, but I think it's a good idea and it should probably be done. What's my favorite? Does it say what?
Well, it wasn't for you. I think it was for the survey. But what is your favorite sci-fi film that has inspired you?
Oh, I don't want to talk too much about myself. No, it is incidentally Ursula K. Le Guin, so that just she's very good at what she does. Anyway, and obviously Matt Damon planting potatoes. That will always win. Yeah.
All right. Any final questions? Thoughts? It doesn't have to be a question. Okay. Oh. Ben, or all right, Ben.
Like we can do it quickly.
Yeah. Mine was more hopefully a bit of a chilled question than what we're talking about at the minute. Obviously, the perception of space travel has quite changed. You're saying go back to, you know, ancient times we looked at it. What do you think will change the perception now? Because it's about like the 60s, it was the space race. What do you think? Well, yeah, what's your opinion? What do you think it'll be at the moment?
This is a very good question. And there's a long shit. I wanted to answer this really quickly, didn't I? So I can't answer this quickly, but I do think alien life is going to be it's going to make a massive. There's going to be a massive shift, not just in space exploration, how we think about space exploration, but philosophy and theology and how we think about the universe. But there are so many other things. If mining on the moon actually starts happening, if people actually land on Mars, if and so on and so forth, all of that is going to be incredibly significant. So yeah, I picked my favorites. It's alien life. What do you think?
Well, I was thinking the same. Yeah, but if you found life, that'd be an incredible. Yeah, people's mind would explode. That'd be incredible. Yeah. Really? Do you not think?
Yeah, it's going to.
If the majority of people in the world are religious,
No.
so if like the majority of the people in the world have some sort of faith or religion in their eyes, this is like the haven. If there was proof there's something somewhere else, then it'd be interesting, incredible to find out.
Okay. I think we did. I think before we escalate into speculation about whether it actually matters or not, whatever we do here, maybe there were a couple more questions. I think I'm just conscious that Francis also had a question and Ben had a question. So, sorry, I'll
I let someone else speak. That's a comment.
come and talk to you, Arturo. Yeah, I think Francis wanted to say something. Yeah. Alien, stop. Anyway, okay, bye. Good chatting. Yeah.
So another avenue that's become increasingly prevalent in media is whenever a new telescope is designed, it's always talked about of, oh, how many years since the Big Bang can this telescope see? I mean, you've seen it with JWST. Every single time it's, oh, how many years? And it's kind of a point in popular science of, oh, you're looking really far back, when in reality, that's not necessarily always interesting. I mean, I don't think the cosmic microwave background is overly fascinating to someone who hasn't studied science.
Dare you?
So my question is about why would this not work as a narrative potentially? Because it's not in the three that you've chosen, is looking at the early universe and the origins of the universe.
Why would it not work?
Yeah, why is that perhaps maybe not the avenue that you've chosen out of the three you've picked?
Well, the honest answer is I didn't think of it, but because actually I think it would work, and we see that in reporting. People are extremely interested in where we come from and the Big Bang, and so I'm afraid this is going to get asked about telescopes for the rest of human history. But the question is, I think, is that a problem? Is it a problem that the focus is on how many years into the past can we now see things? So unless it's a problem, unless it precludes other research questions or other important things, that wouldn't be very high up on my list of priorities. But if you now tell me that it is a problem, then I can add it to my list of priorities and we can get going on that.
I mean, personally, I would go down the route of planet formation first before I go down the route of origins of the universe, because I think on a scale basis, that's a good way of working back. Yeah. But I don't know. Depends on audience perception, I guess. Like Anesta was saying, seeing different bits in the media and how they've been engaged with is the best step forward with that.
Well, it's a good point, isn't it, about planet formation and how that again ties back to our planet and what we can do to nurture and sustain our planet. So let's talk more.
Absolutely.
Talk to you after this is over.
Was there another question?
I'm here. No. Oh. So let's thank you again. Thank you very much. Thank you.